Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming in today. I'm delighted with the fact that I can be the first one to be kicking off an agency's essentials program. It's basically designed for our agency partners, and it's here to support your knowledge and your skill development and basically try to foster a sense of community to learn from one another. My name's Mike Yapp, and I've been with Google for 10 years. I'm the founder and chief creative officer of The Zoo, a creative group within Google that's here to help you as an agency exploit all the opportunities there are both innovatively and creatively at Google. My presentation today is going to be about creating an effective presentation. And it's years of me doing this. There are some things here that are going to be rudimentary to some and elementary to some, and some things here that'll be revelatory. I think all I'm looking for is something to help you, and maybe there'll be something here you'll find helpful for you developing a more effective presentation, particularly in these times when we're doing presentations online like this. So without further ado, let's get started. I want to talk about creating an engaging presentation. This is really a basic class on creating an effective presentation and some of the things you might want to look out for. Like I said earlier, I've been doing this for a really long time, and it's one of these things that's been near and dear to me. And I want to say special thanks to Maria Perazzo, a designer that has worked for me for years. She's now a creative director who helped me put this presentation together. So first of all, the question is, what is a presentation design? Well, presentation design is simply a graphically guided conversation. And it uses visuals and words to tell a story by design. I know you're saying, well, of course, Mike. But it only works if it is succinct and it's logical. It connects with the audience, it captures my attention, and it sells the idea ultimately. So why is design important? Well, for me, it's like intrinsic, but for some people, there's a question. And that question can be answered by just saying, because it can create a mood. It can establish the tone of your presentation, and it can focus attention. So for example, you look at a photograph like this. This establishes emotion, and it may be somber. Or you look at a grid like this with some strange line, and that strange line creates tension. Or you have a grid of apples, and only one is red, and that's the one you look at. That's the focus. And all of these things work to your advantage in presentation. So what makes good presentation design? Well, the first thing is editing and restraint. Remember, everything you put on a page matters, so you have to be extremely selective. And design isn't decoration. It isn't additive. Good design's about reducing. It's about making something come to its simplest form without losing what's important that you want to say. So let's talk about the first thing, applying basic design and proportion and balance. This right here is known as the golden spiral, ratio spiral, and it's found in nature and it's applied in art. So for example, here it is in a shell. This thing is the personification of art equaling math. And when we think about this, this ratio is 1 to 1.618. It's the golden mean, and it's an actual mathematical ratio linked to aesthetically pleasing proportioning in nature and art. And it's been used by designers and architects for centuries. When you think about it, think of the actual frame of this presentation you're looking at now. See that as this ratio rectangle. And when you look at it, you can cut this rectangle by a square, the width and the length of 1.168. It is the ratio of the longer side to the shorter side, and it defines the square within. So if I cut that, I can cut it again. And then what I do is I can cut that piece again and again, and it continues to create this same ratio throughout. It's basic geometry. And you can cut that square forever, and it'll continue to do this. Why is that important? Because you can design a page with that. When we look at this, this is what the original PowerPoint presentations used to look like, 8.5 by 11. And what was the reason for it? Basically, the reason was, well, you can print it out on a piece of paper. But the fact is, it is constraining for design. Why do we go for this one? The 1280 by 720? This is basically an 11 by 17 design. And the beauty of this 12 by 80 by 720 page size is that it allows for more white space to accentuate your copy. It also provides more definition to your design, and it accommodates the correct aspect ratio for videos. So you drop a video in this and it'll go full bleed and it'll look beautiful. So let's apply this design to page layout. This, again, was what we all found was bizarre about PowerPoint, this little square that you were working with. But notice the layout here in the grid. It's 2 on 2. In other words, a 2-column grid. And my eyes, if they're anything like yours, are jumping from my favorite Disney memory to a giraffe constantly. And obviously, I'm not reading anything. And then finally, I look up and I say, they're searching for Disney Vacation in Memories. That is ineffective because it isn't focusing my attention really on anything. A simple layout grid utilizes the rule of thirds and makes it much easier to design. If you have thirds, there will always be a center or there will always be an area of emphasis. This is the thirds I'm talking about. 3 columns horizontally, 3 columns vertically. And those 3 columns, either way, can be cut up into ultimately different kinds of design that can emphasize whatever you need to emphasize. So let's look at this in a simple example. Here's the grid, and I decide I need to put a vertical piece of creative on this. I want to arrange that graphic on the page. So I use that corner side, and I put that graphic in there. Then what I want to do is I want to balance typographic elements with that. So I would then make myself some copy. Grids are fun. Use them to distribute typography. Now notice, I can now balance the verticality of the photograph or the image on the left, on my left, to the copy on the right. And everything is pushing to look at the graphic and to read the copy. Even when that graphic is moving, I still see and I'm not disrupted from looking at and reading the copy. Now, as long as we're in copy, I'm going to talk about some basics here. As you can see, grids are fun is actually what would be referred to as a headline. And the second thing, use the grid to distribute typography, that's referred to as a deck. And this copy down here is called body copy. Each one of those has their own size. The length of that column of copy is called a line measure. And it only is as strong as the height of or the type size that you're using as your body copy. If I went any smaller than the size I'm using right now, your eye would not be able to follow and read to the next line. So we've stretched the capabilities here as far as you can stretch them with this typeface for you to read from one line to the next line to the next line. If we got any smaller, we'd have to have 2 columns underneath this deck. So let's pursue typography a little more. When you're using typography, it is best to use one font family. This is a typical font family, probably the most famous font family, Helvetica. This particular cut of Helvetica is called Helvetica New Bold. And you differentiate these by there is a bold weight, there's a lightweight, and then there's an ultra lightweight in Helvetica. At Google, what we use is Google Sans. And this is the typeface that we use when we are doing any of our communications. And it follows the same rules of bold, light, and regular or lighter weight. Now, when we look at that, one of the things that I find problematic sometimes is how do I align my type in a presentation? In Western cultures, we read from left to right. By aligning left and including a ragged right, We're able to read copy much more easily. Our eye can follow it. One of the other things we do sometimes is we justify a line. Now, I don't recommend this unless you're writing a book, because the fact of the matter is this becomes much harder to read. And when you have too much of it, you begin to get rivers of white between some of the words, and they can become distracting. So left align type is your safest, best way to be utilizing this. I'd avoid justifying alignment. Same way with headlines. Here's a centered headline. This only works if the deck is balanced with the headline. And in this case, it is, because it's proportional. But what if the word was a lot shorter? All of a sudden, the headline is teetering on the deck. So what I really recommend you do is, instead of centering the copy, it's very simple, justify left again. It's much safer and much more successful much of the time. Now, here's another thing. Perhaps you don't know it, but you should be using secondary leading. It's not something that comes easy in any one of the programs that are presentation programs. This, if you read it, you find out that there's actually 3 points of information that we want to talk about in this copy. The problem that we have is this copy is all spaced exactly the same. And the space that you see from the bottom of the word solutions to the bottom of the word strategy, that's called leading. And that's your primary leading, okay? But secondary leading should be used to bring about what is really what you're trying to say here, which is 3 separate points. Secondary leading allows for each point to be clearly standing apart. And all it is a very simple thing, whether you're using slides or any other program. Look at the customized spacing, and you will see a secondary or paragraph leading as well. And I would recommend to use that. Okay. One other thing that I find scary is bolding copy. And I say this, if everything's important, nothing is important. And this is over bolding. I see more of this than anything else right now. And really, you don't really see anything here. All you see is a sea of black type, one blacker than the other, but none is really standing out. And one other thing I'd say is, when you're using type, align it on a common axis between slides. That can really help you, because that consistency provides a cue for your eye. Whether you want to make that a consistent headline, or if you want to say this is a section or category section, that alignment, the eye will get used to it, will look for it, and it really helps in transitioning from slide to slide. And remember, less is more. Don't overload the page with type. Really, look at this. This is not a slide. This actually is a document that should be used as a leave behind. No one is going to follow this. When you start having this much type, the way you look at it is you have to critically edit yourself. So here's how I would say your biggest or most heavy used type should be corrected. First of all, make your headline count. Make it work. The headline should say everything. This body copy should be something that I don't necessarily need the audience to read. And then, as you can see here, build your content. I'm doing a build in this program so that you can read it as I talk about it. So build it if you have a lot. And when you want to bring out certain points, I would then say use bullets, and use those bullets as your summary points. But truly, the whole key here is make your headline count and build your content as you go so that the audience can follow along. All right, let's talk about numbers. We use a lot of numbers in our slides at Google, and I'm sure you do too. Numbers can be effective, but they have to be used in moderation. This is a typical slide that we've seen years ago at Google. And there's a lot of numbers here. And my question is, which one is supposed to be important? And then you have to ask yourself editorially, what is it that I'm trying to say? If what I'm trying to say is a particular point, then numbers are only going to be effective when I give them a relevant context. So if I say 5 billion here and I give it context, that says everything I need to know about the importance of YouTube. And then when I give it that context, I say that's 15 videos watched every day for every man, woman, and child in the United States. Anybody that sees that only needs one point of information to know, wow, YouTube must be pretty important. All right, let's talk about charts too. Now I know that we can do all sorts of things with charts. We can put clip art in them. We could actually put shadows on them. But really, when using charts, keep them flat and simple. And make sure that you emphasize the number or chart line that you want people to look at. In this case, the red is what I want everybody to see. The rest of the information is supporting issue, but the red is the important issue. And the more things that I put in the way of me understanding that red is best, or red is biggest, or red is the thing you need to see, the more distraction I'm going to give to the information that I want to use. And then when you use those charts, don't put a bunch of them on a page. Put one chart on every page, give it the credence that it's supposed to be given for the importance that it is, and take the time to go through the chart. Okay, let's talk about color theory now. I know we all like color and sometimes we overuse color, but there actually is some science behind this. This happens to be the color wheel, and if you go to any designer anywhere in the world, you will find a color wheel on their desk. And you ask yourself, well, that's interesting. What does it mean? Well, Sir Isaac Newton developed the first circular diagram of colors in 1666. It is a set of principles used to create harmonious color combinations. So if you're anything like me and you have a hard time when you get up in the morning dressing yourself, this can be helpful. The color wheel visually represents all those colors by wrapping the spectrum into a circle in a logically arranged sequence. Why is it important? Because first of all, it starts out with the primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. And then all the other colors are derived from these three pigments, and they can be mixed to create a combination of other colors. So first you have primary color, then you have the secondary color. Yellow and red equals orange, yellow and blue equals green, blue and red equal purple. And you're saying, well, of course, Mike, so what do I need to know now? Well, there's also tertiary colors. And these colors are formed by mixing the primary and the secondary colors. So you get things like blue, green, red, violet, yellow, and orange. All right, I get it. We've got a lot of colors. How do you work with them? Well, if you use this color wheel, every color that is directly across from the other color happens to be called a complementary color. And any one of them that are across from each other or three adjacent to each other are called analogous colors. Now, those analogous colors can appear anywhere on this color wheel. So why is that color wheel important? Because it allows us to create color palettes for branding and presentations. So you can pick a palette. You either choose one or up to 3 different colors, but then you balance those colors with a neutral and a black or a white. Yeah, think of the white as a color that you're using here. So there can be a complementary color palette where you have a green and a blue and a gray and a white. Or you can have an analogous color palette where it's kind of a light blue and then a Kelly green and then a gray and a black. Or you can have a monochromatic palette. These palettes are used and they should be consistent throughout your presentation. At YouTube, the presentation color palette is red and black and gray and white. But in this particular presentation, you see, I've chosen to use a blue, a gray, and a lighter gray, and a white. And the reason why I've done that, I'm going to tell you why next. Because colors depict emotion. So there's yellow is optimism, red is excitement, blue is trust. Trust me. That's why I use this color for this presentation. And then finally, gray equals balance. Now, why are these important? Because brands use them. And as you can see, McDonald's wants you to be optimistic when you go in and happy when you come out when you get your Happy Meal. And Target wants you to be excited as you go in their stores. And Coca-Cola says, we're going to make you excited. And then you talk about Twitter or GE as trustful companies. And then for balance and gravitas, you see Apple and Wikipedia employing gray. So speaking of these brands, when you do your presentation, don't try to conform your deck to a client's brand. It's really, it's scary to do. There's too many opportunities for failure there. You don't have their brand style guide, and therefore you are flirting with disaster and misusing their style and their brand. For us, we represent Google. We like to stick to the Google branding. If you want to demonstrate the custom nature of a pitch, then you should place the logo unobtrusively in the corner of your slide. And this goes for anybody that's presenting to a client. So there are opportunities for color usage. Why do we use them? First of all, to attract attention. Okay, I see that's different from the words I just had. It's blue and it's attracting my attention. Secondly, it can group the elements, all the blue elements as opposed to the gray elements. And then it can emphasize a meaning. And finally, it can enhance the aesthetics. And really, truly, let's try to use some restraint when we're using colors. Like I said, one color and balanced grays or blacks with it will be the most successful way in which you build your presentation. Okay, let's talk about artwork, images, and graphics. We use those a lot. We'll use an image to give data context. Rather than using numbers sometimes, an image can really imply or say what you want to say in a very simple and relevant fashion. So if I look at this little boy being tossed in the air, what can I use that for? I can say there are more smartphones being activated every minute than babies being born. And all of a sudden, I don't need a number to say, oh my God, there's a lot of smartphones being activated. And it becomes fun. And then you can use photography to set a mood or a tone. So for example, in this one, I'd done a presentation about YouTube in Europe. And what I wanted to do in talking to a European tourism board is I wanted to show some sophistication and some understanding and appreciation for the coloring and the style that is YouTube. So I used red, and I chose this image to demonstrate that we're going to be talking about Europe, and it's going to be a sophisticated presentation, I hope. And then when you use people, use real people to ensure authenticity, because authenticity is really paramount in your presentations. This kind of stuff, we really don't need to use. This is stock photography, and I just say, nobody has that white of teeth, nobody has that clean of skin, and nobody looks like this. So let's try to avoid it and be real. And when we're talking about selecting those photos, look, you can find photos using Google Search, Getty Images, any of the various sites we have out there. When you use Google Search, if you're not using it for publication or for you to gain some money, there is no violation of copyright. You can use them. And look for the highest aspect ratio you can when you do this, and select for tone and authenticity. Really and truly, avoid posed and stock photography. For me, it just doesn't work. It's not realistic enough. And if you're going to do clip art, you better be a pretty good designer, and you want to be using it in as ironic, because for me, I just don't use clip art at all. And finally, some of the trends I've been finding lately is animated GIFs. And I would say use them wisely and sparsely because they can be distracting. You're not looking at that type, you're looking at that goofy GIF. So finally, let's talk about the key takeaways. First of all, number one, I hope you found that by this presentation that design really does matter. You can be a slob like me, but your well-crafted deck can speak tons for you, and it can give you a lot of validation. Secondly, one of the things is, remember that your idea is the star of your presentation. When you put a presentation together, don't hide the idea, whether by hiding it with decoration, too many things, or not a direct path to the idea. Your entire presentation should build to reinforce that idea, the primary message or the action to be taken. And every slide should be logically going at that direction to then crescendo at your idea. And then thirdly, power in simplicity. Less is more. Decoration is distraction. Really and truly, in a presentation, be brief, be brilliant, and then be gone. So remember, you have one first impression. This deck is going to be the one that is your impression to your client. Use it wisely. Thank you. Now, if you have any questions, you can put them in the form that is provided with this video, or you can contact me directly. I thank you all for attending. I hope this was somewhat helpful. Bye-bye.